Welcome back to the news at 10. At least 6 persons have been abducted by gunmen along the Kaduna-Abuja highway on Sunday evening. A latest incident is coming barely 24 hours after the police killed 3 suspected kidnappers and arrested 26 others on the Kaduna-Abuja and Kaduna-Zaria Expressway. The public relations officer of the Kaduna Police Command, DSP Yakubu Sabo, says the armed men in military uniform intercepted a commercial bus around 11:40 p.m. on Sunday near Rijana village along Kaduna-Abuja Expressway and then took 6 persons into the bush. He explains that police patrol teams within the axis were quickly mobilized to the scene and engaged the hoodlums in a gun battle, and as a result, 2 of the victims were released by the criminals in their desperate attempt to escape. He also gives the assurance that efforts are still on to rescue the rest of the victims and arrest the kidnappers. Let's take a look at some business news now. Here's Kayode Okikiolu.
You First. First Bank.
It's great to see you, Jama. You're welcome to Business News. Oil prices firmed up today on expectations that Saudi Arabia's approach to the output cut deal by the Organization of Oil-Producing Countries will continue as before. Global oil prices benchmark Brent crude futures jumped 2.3% to $62.58 a barrel after the kingdom's new energy minister, Abdulaziz bin Salman, announced that the world's largest oil exporter will continue to support output cuts by OPEC and other producers to raise prices. Abdulaziz, who replaced former energy minister Khalid Al-Fali, was part of the OPEC team that negotiated the current deal between OPEC and non-OPEC allies, including Russia, to curb the production, which was struck in late 2016. Meanwhile, United Arab Emirates Energy Minister says OPEC and non-member producers are committed to achieving oil market balance. Well, the president and group CEO of MTN, Rob Shutter, has described the recent xenophobic attacks on Nigerian-owned businesses and foreign-owned businesses and reprisal attacks in Nigeria as unfortunate. Speaking to Channels Television after a stakeholders meeting with the police minister and other security chiefs, he welcomed the support of the Nigerian government, which has led to the reopening of the MTN headquarters in Nigeria.
As a South African, I've been horrified by what's been going on. I always say that South Africa needs to be safe for all those that live here. And it hasn't been. We know there's a lot of fake media, but there's also real media. And so I think the xenophobic attacks in South Africa have been an absolute disgrace. Now, of course, I would also have to say that reprisal attacks on MTN assets in Nigeria, I think, is also very unfortunate. Ultimately, MTN is not responsible for law and order in South Africa. MTN is really a group that is almost 50% owned by international investors in Boston and New York and London. So it's also a little bit simplistic to say we're a South African company. And of course, regrettably, the 4 stores that were damaged in Nigeria were actually owned by Nigerian business people, even though they are MTN branded. So I do believe the situation is stabilizing. Our head office reopened in Lagos this morning, and if things continue to be calm, we will reopen the stores. That's important because we need to service our customers. But we also need a very extensive engagement program just to make sure that all the key stakeholders understand what the situation is, what we're doing. That's why we were very positive that this session was set up, that we would get a chance to communicate, particularly to the Minister of Police and the security agencies, the implications on business across Africa of us not being able to guarantee the safety and security of everybody who's living and working in.
Well, outside the African continent, latest data from the UK Statistics Office shows the economy grew faster than expected to 0.3% in July, and this has eased fears of a recession. Growth was flat over the 3 months to July, but this was an improvement on the 0.2% contraction which was seen in the April to June quarter. However, while growth in the services sector, which accounts for about 80% of the economy, helped to drive July's stronger than expected growth figure, the Statistics Office warns that the sector remained weak. UK's manufacturing sector remains an area of concern, with tightening cash flow, concerns over disrupted supply chains and weakening demand in key markets weighing on activity. Speaking of activity, last-minute sell-offs on the shares of some high-value listed equities pulled back the stock market's main index from an initial expectation of a positive start for the week. Tanya Lashobo-Ali has the details of today's trading.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. A massive 2.86% plunge from the consumer goods sector of the NSE pushed the stock market to a negative start for the second week of September after mixed performance from other key sub-indexes. High profit taken on its major component, Leslie Nigeria, which led to 5.73% loss on its share price, overshadowed the gains from oil and gas as well as key banking sector components, resulting to 0.21% drop in the NSE's main index. The price table ended with a positive margin of 15 gainers, led by 9.09% gain, each from UACN and UAC Properties, which have remained top on that category since the start of the month. Traders attribute the consistent gains from both companies to their joint share recapitalization and restructuring plans. On the other hand, livestock feeds led 14 other losers, down by 7.14%, while the trio of GT Bank, FBN Holdings and Transcorp are major contributors to nearly 300 million shares traded for the day. And that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Teniola Shuboali.
Thank you, Tenny. On a global scale, it's a broadly mixed close for major global stock markets as investors focus attention on Brexit battle and more optimism around US-China trade relations. Well, let's see some of the closing figures. Well, thank you for watching Business News Tonight. I am Kayode Okikiolu. The news at 10 continues with Ijeoma.
You first. First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Coyote. The UK's Parliament is set to begin a 5-week suspension after rejecting government's call for a snap election. Well, this comes as the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, announced his resignation, set for October the 31st, when Britain is supposed to be leaving the EU. Here's Juliana Olayinka with more on international news, and that's going to be on Around the World in 5.
Good evening from the Channel's newsroom in London. There's been a big day in British politics amid the Brexit crisis. Parliament has now been suspended for 5 weeks, which means lawmakers won't sit again until the middle of October, giving them just 2 weeks to debate matters before the Brexit deadline.
I think it's disgraceful. Parliament should be sitting and Parliament should be holding the government to account. And the Prime Minister appears to be wanting to run away from questions. He was appointed Prime Minister at the end of July. He's faced one Prime Minister's question time, and now he's proroguing Parliament, so there will not be a PMQs this Wednesday.
Brexit now!
The Prime Minister has promised to leave the European Union by the end of next month, with or without a deal. But a new law has now been passed, forcing Boris Johnson to seek another delay to prevent the country from crashing out of the EU.
It provides time to go into court if the government doesn't do what's required, in order to get the court to order the government to do so. Because we're dealing with a Prime Minister here who is going around the country saying, well, I may not do what the law requires. Now, there's only one other way of squaring that circle, and that would be for the Prime Minister to resign.
Michel Barnier has been here recently.
Speaking in Dublin, Boris Johnson said he believes the deal can be done by October the 18th. His Irish counterpart, Leo Varadkar, says it all centres on the country's border with Northern Ireland.
In the absence of agreed alternative arrangements, no backstop is no deal for us. All it does is kick the can down the road for another 14 months. We must protect the peace and also the burgeoning all-island economy. And that's why for us the backstop continues to be a critical component of the withdrawal agreement unless and until alternatives are found. But we are open to alternatives, but they must be realistic ones, legally binding and workable. And we haven't received such proposals to date.
I want to get a deal. Like you, I've looked carefully at no deal. I've assessed its consequences both for our country and yours. And yes, of course, we could do it. The UK could certainly get through it. But be in no doubt that outcome would be a failure of statecraft for which we would all be responsible. Of course, we must get Brexit done because the UK must come out on October the 31st, by October the 31st, or else I fear that permanent damage will be done in the UK to trust in our democratic system.
Tens of thousands of British Airways passengers have been affected by the biggest walkout in the airline's 100-year history. 1,700 flights were grounded as pilots began a two-day strike over pay and conditions. BA says the majority of its pilots accepted an 11.5% pay rise offer over 3 years, but the union wants the deal to include profit sharing. The airline rejected the idea, describing it as an 11th-hour inflated proposal.
I'm really sorry that the cynical actions of the pilots' union have put us in this position. Is by all accounts an own goal. It's going to punish customers, it's going to punish our brand.
Officials in the Bahamas have defended their response to Hurricane Dorian. At least 43 people were killed when the Category 5 storm smashed through the area last week. Residents on the Abaco Islands are accusing the government of failing to provide assistance and preventing looting. Hundreds, possibly thousands of people are still missing. The United Nations observed a minute's silence at the opening of the Human Rights Council in Geneva to remember the victims of the disaster. Robert Mugabe's nephew says the former Zimbabwean leader died a very bitter man. Leo Mugabe says his uncle found it difficult to accept that people he trusted had turned against him. A row is brewing over where the former president should be buried. A state funeral at the National Sports Stadium is being planned for Saturday.
He was bitter. He was bitter. You know, you can expect, you can imagine people that you trusted, people that were guarding you, people that were looking after your security are the same people that, you know, turn against you.
And finally, some hope for millions of people suffering from Parkinson's disease and essential tremor. The conditions can cause hands to shake so severely that everyday tasks become difficult and impossible. But now gloves with built-in spinning gyroscopes have been developed, and trials show that they help counteract tremors.
I can't cut my nails, I can't cut my toenails. There's all sorts of things that I can't do, but these are going to enable me to do a bit more, keep more of my independence instead of losing it day by day.
And that's your international news around the world in 5.
Thanks a lot, Juliana. Power of medical science. We move on now. And still ahead on the news at 10, Rafa Nadal claims epic 5-set win over Daniel Medvedev to win 19th Grand Slam title at the US Open. That's on sports. Please stay with us.